Well, here we go again. Happy Friday to you. I'm Marlon Bowling, your tour guide to the ag commodities. Man, I'm so glad you could join us today as we take a look at our ag trade. And there wasn't a whole lot going on in the ag commodity markets overnight. Although, just as I was getting ready to come down to the studio here a moment ago, I had a bit of a surprise. And we'll talk with our guest about it here in a second. We actually had news of an overnight export sale that was announced by USDA. My gosh, I forgot those even took place. It's been quite a while. And so I just got done entering that into the system. What it is a sale of, believe it or not, some corn. And the buyer was China. And it was 133,000 tons of corn sold to China. It was for new crop delivery. Gonna have to dust off this template so we can actually show some sales overnight. It's been a long time in coming, and I want to bring on board Mr. Brian Hoops, president of Midwest Market Solutions. So Brian, we'll get the cobwebs off of this report and actually show one again. Does that mean they're gonna finally get back in the groove and start their seasonal buying or not?
Yeah, we certainly hope so, Marlon. Good morning. It's been a long time since we've seen a sale of corn or soybeans or wheat, for that matter. Just has been very quiet on our newswire front. But it's good to see that China's coming in and buying from the U.S. They have been buying from South America recently, and it's great to see that they're coming to the U.S. for some quality corn as well. Now, we've talked about this before. They've probably been hedging this market and buying a futures contract, so they may sell some futures right on the opening this morning after this sale has been announced. So wouldn't be surprised to see a little dip in the corn market, but overall it tells us that demand is surfacing at this price level for corn. And then when you combine what's happening in the Western Corn Belt with some export business, I think the mentality is going to be going into the weekend, pretty friendly to this market. There's good rains in the Eastern Belt, but the Western Belt's going to remain dry. In fact, down here, we've been talking about Southwest Missouri for quite some time. Down here, we're expected to see next week the hottest temperatures in a decade, well over 100 degrees for a number of days.
Wow. Okay. Now, Tim Ross and I were just talking about, of course, he is originally from Southwest Iowa, and he was talking with some friends of his from back in that area last night, I believe. And sounds like they're having difficulty out there. Things are really drying out fast, and crops are going downhill in a hurry. Well, Brian, can you confirm that? I know you have offices all around the Western Corn Belt.
Yeah, you have all the Western Belt basically from South Dakota down into, Texas, where they've been experiencing drought-like conditions. Now, you get a little farther north, you get into central Iowa, northern Iowa, eastern Iowa, they've had a lot more rain. And so you don't have that type of, deterioration in the crop. But certainly parts of Southwest Iowa are starting to feel it. A lot of Missouri feeling it, central Missouri, all the way up until northern Missouri. So there's a big area that's experiencing this drought. And when you talk about having record yields like the 177 that the USDA is forecasting, you have to have some of these smaller corn producing states like Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas have these big yields, or you're not going to produce that record amount. It's hard for the big I states, Iowa and Illinois, to make up for it.
So you know exactly where I was going with that. It's making it increasingly difficult to ever reach that kind of a level here. When is the trade going to realize that?
Yeah, and maybe we start here soon. One thing we've been talking about is the U.S. dollar, and that's what the trade has been really focused on, is strengthening that dollar. Well, we didn't see much buying come in overnight. It's not enough to make new highs. In fact, the dollar's trading lower here this morning. That's going to help us out, I think, as well. So you have some positives to start the morning off with this export news, with the dollar showing some weakness on the board. Forecast for next week. All these are positive. So I think it's key to see a healthy rally today going into the weekend.
So the dollar is down 500 points on September futures. Well, let's recap where we ended up on the Globex here just a few minutes ago. On the December corn, we were 4 1/4 higher. We're at 605 1/4, so solidly above that $6 mark. On the soybeans, we ended up with the August a penny and a half higher at 1473 1/4. Extremely quiet there. On the wheat market overnight in Chicago, you had September finishing 3.5 cents lower at 791 1/2. By the way, you'll notice that July contract is gone off of that board. On the Kansas City trade, September down 4 3/4 at 844. And Minneapolis wheat overnight, we had the September contract finishing up at 909 3/4. That was down just 3/4 of a cent. We'll come back in a moment and talk with Brian about our livestock trade here on a Friday after this. As we get into our livestock discussion, let's review what we had going on yesterday in our cash cattle market. On the big board on our livestock summary, we saw a wide range of trade when it comes to cash cattle. Let's go ahead and take a look here. We had the lower end of the range on live basis cattle, 136 all the way up to 139. So it's kind of straddling where it was at last check. I believe we had 137 the day before on some light sales. So we'll call it steady to weaker. It was actually more like maybe a mixed market. And the same thing would apply when it comes to the dress basis sales. We had an even wider range there. I see a lower end of the range at around 220 yesterday on a dress basis set. They had a high of 232, about a $12 range right there. Again, basically, roughly about mixed or so. It looked like most of the action would gravitate toward that 230 mark there yesterday. And live hogs around the country yesterday, not enough to establish a market trend there. On the carcass basis hogs nationwide, the price was $119.45, and that would have been down almost $3 on the day. Now, where did we wrap up the day yesterday on the futures? Let's take a look at our live cattle board. And we had triple-digit losses on the first 4 contract months yesterday. August did go down by $1.47. We were at 135.40. Over on the feeder cattle trade yesterday, when we headed home, August was down $1.90 at 178.90 yesterday, and that led the way to the downside of all those contract months. Triple-digit losses everywhere. Lean hogs, we also had a lot of pressure. The August was down 92 cents yesterday at 109.57. I want to go back to Brian Hoops and find out what the deal is here with this cash cattle trade out in the plains. So it seems like we really don't have much of a sense of direction out there, Brian. Real wide trading ranges out there, and it depends on what geographic region you're in, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the cash trade's been stronger in the north, but this week on a dress basis, that's where we saw most of the weakness. A couple dollars lower in a lot of areas, which was a little bit of a surprise, but it might be tied to just moving some animals because of the extreme heat that we've seen. We've seen a lot of reports about animals moving out of the feedlots that are a little bit heavier and just wanting to get them sold before, any type of a death loss could occur. And we're going to see probably more of that, especially with pasture conditions deteriorating real rapidly. But southern trade pretty much steady with a week ago. It hasn't been near as strong as what the northern trade was. The cash hog movement's been pretty decent. We've seen strength in the cash markets. The lean hog index is continuing to rally, indicating that the cash trade has been moving higher. And that's really been a supportive feature for the hog futures.
Okay, well, Brian, thanks for explaining everything, and good to talk with you again. Best wishes for a great weekend out there. Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. Suzanne, we'll get everything underway at the bottom of the hour. Fasten up your seatbelt.